YouTube, what is going on? We are outside with the 2024 Acura Integra Type S, and today we are going to be doing an extensive review of this car because $51,000 plus is a lot of money to spend. And after 1,000 miles behind the wheel of my Integra Type S, I want to let you know if it's worth it. $7,105 is the price difference between the Acura Integra Type S and the Civic Type R. And over the course of this video, hopefully I can answer the question of if that money is justified to you. There's no mistake about it. The Type S certainly looks aggressive. It has these wide hips, this aggressive front bumper, this functional hood scoop, these body lines that extend past the hood into the bumper. Overall, the Integra does a great job at conveying sort of this more premium experience versus the Civic Type R, all while maintaining an aggressive styling. I love how the Acura Integra looks. What I don't love, however, is this gloss black. While it looks great, while this car is new, I'm very interested to see how this will age. I do, however, love the front parking sensors. They are very helpful in parking environments, but let's see what's under the hood, because part of that $7,100 difference, and one of the reasons why everyone has an issue with the pricing of the Integra Type S, is because this engine is shared. But Acura did recalibrate it. This is the 2-liter engine, the K20Z1, out of the Civic Type R. In the Acura Integra Type S, it makes 320 horsepower, and Acura retuned this to give it more part-throttle mid-range torque. Reaching peak horsepower in this car does require 93 octane, but you will notice that added power very much so over the Civic Type R. It is apparent. It allows you to stay in a lower gear in highway passing scenarios. This car is faster in a straight line, but Acura also added a lot more NVH underneath the hood in an attempt to reduce some of that engine noise, the unwanted engine noise at speed, so that you have a more luxurious experience behind the wheel. Remember, $7,100 can come in little bits and pieces, right? It doesn't have to be a big engine change or all-wheel drive. Acura can do little things here and there that actually, maybe justify that $7,100 difference. But let's close the hood and keep walking around this Integra Type S, because I don't think we fully grasped just how good this car looks. Now, we've talked about the revised engine tune, but we haven't really touched on the fact that the Integra Type S is a completely different car than the Civic in the exterior department. It doesn't have molded fender flares, it doesn't have a large rear wing, so even though it shares the same 4-piston Brembos with 2-piece floating rotors and the dual-axis front suspension with the helical limited slip differential, there is a lot different here, especially in terms of the aesthetic appearance. So remember, keep all of these things in mind as you tally up in the back of your head if the Integra Type S is worth that $7,100 difference. Now, this car has 265 squared tires all around, which is hilarious on a front-wheel drive car. Now, you don't get two-piece rotors in the back, but you don't really need them. You have them where it counts, and that'll hopefully reduce some of the heat that the Type R was known to have back in its FK8 generation. Now, mine is in this Tiger Eye Pearl, and I think this color looks terrific. The rear end of the Integra Type S has a quote-unquote diffuser that is done entirely in gloss black with the quintessential 3 pipes right in the center. Now, because the Acura Integra Type S is only available in North America, it can conform to some other rules when it comes to the exhaust, which means we have one resonator less, and as a result, we get to have some fun, we get to have some pops and bangs that the Civic Type R does not get. So we're going to start this video with the Integra in its comfort setting, put it in sport, listen to the difference. types of pops and sounds that come out of this exhaust are just terrific. But as we open up the hatch of this Integra, because like the Civic, the Integra Type S is also a hatchback, you are presented with tons of space. Honestly, it's SUV levels of room back here. Shout out to Sunnyside for giving me that Type S hat. But you do truly have an small SUV's level of space. I have way more trunk space in here than I did in my Kona N. Both seats lie flat to give me even more room. No spare tire, but that's kind of expected going into it with cars like this. You do get a fix-a-flat, which is nice, but I'm never going to use it. But really, the biggest place where you see the differences between the Civic Type R and the Integra Type S is the interior. And it starts on the door card. Premium materials on top, squishy leather where you put your hand, nice buttons used for the windows, which, by the way, it's weird that only the front two are auto. But anyway, nice, supple Alcantara, great squishy place for your hand, and only hard plastic on the bottom where you sort of kick this door open. Now, interior aside, the Integra actually also has more floor and firewall insulation, making the interior a little bit quieter than the Civic Type R. The left side of the steering wheel controls the left side of the instrument cluster, the right side of the steering wheel controls the right side of the instrument cluster, and this car does have adaptive cruise control and lane keep. Now, unlike the Type R and some of its other competition, you can't really change that instrument cluster. It really just is what it is, and the only thing that alters is the color of the rings on the speedo and the RPM, but that's fine. It's vibrant, it's colorful, it gives you the information you need, and it's clear, which I enjoy. Now, in comfort mode, there you see the blue rings. Change it to sport, it changes to gray. Sport Plus, it turns to red, and in individual, you can set it to whatever you like. Now, my personal individual settings are the engine and the gauge cluster are in their sportiest mode, so the gauge cluster is red and the engine pops and bangs, but the steering and suspension are set to comfort. This is my fun drive home spec, right? I'm leaving work. I want something that sounds aggressive, that sounds hilarious, but still is really, really comfortable. So, what have we learned so far? The Integra has a recalibrated engine versus the Civic, unique looks versus the Civic, more firewall and floor insulation versus the Civic. The adaptive dampers have been tweaked to be more comfortable versus the Civic. The exhaust is different, allowing for pops and bangs in Sport Plus and individual mode versus the Civic. We're getting a lot of changes here, and I haven't even covered the cost and the difference in the materials that are inside this car. Leather and Alcantara seats, leather steering wheel. The buttons and knobs are more premium than that in the Civic. And you start to get a picture of that $7,100 price tag. But let's get you behind the wheel so you can see for yourself. All right, everybody, we are in Boston to start off our driving portion of the in-depth review of this Acura Integra. Now, over the course of this video, we are going to be doing some city driving, some highway driving, and some back roads driving, because in order for you to get a full understanding of what this car is like to drive, you gotta drive it in multiple different environments. So starting off in the city, we can highlight a couple things about this Integra that you need to know. First off, in individual mode or comfort mode, if you have the setting for the suspension set to comfort, this is actually really comfortable. Now, if you've been to the city of Boston, you know we got, skyscrapers, we got trolley tours, we have good food, we have all this stuff, but we also have bumps in the road, and a lot of them. Right up here, we have bad asphalt, but the comfort setting in this suspension does a great job at soaking up all those bumps. Yes, I do still feel them, but it does a good job at sort of reducing the amount that my back feels of those bumps, which is really nice. The auto rev match feature also works really, really well. A lot of folks feel negative on driving a manual car
in the city-like environment, but this rev match system works fantastic, so it does make that a little bit easier, and the clutch is relatively light, not putting a lot of strain on your left foot for repeated use, both of which is really, really great and super nice to have. This sound system is lovely. It does great with podcasts, it does great with audiobooks, it does great with jazz, and it is very bassy. So if you like hip hop, you like, you know, any of the modern songs, you're a big Ice Spice fan, whatever that is, you will like your audio experience in this car. Overall, around town in city driving, because the steering is direct, because we have the retuned engine with a little more torque, this car is easier to sort of keep in a gear, to sort of dart around places in city driving, and you also have the comfort suspension, which does a great job at soaking up bumps. So because of that, I would highly recommend this vehicle if you are good with driving a manual in the city. But let's get onto the highway, and when we have a fun car like this with a good sound and we drive through a tunnel, we like to drop down the window, we like to get the exhaust open, and we like to give you guys the sound live, raw, unfiltered. So I'm gonna drop it down and let's do this. Good amount of torque there from this K20. The shifts are easy, the shifts are smooth, the shifts are direct. You really can bang through the gears in this car, no problem. This car does like to rev up to 7, but it certainly loses steam around that 6,500 RPM mark. Now, one of the first things you do notice on the highway is the tight ratios of this transmission. We've talked about it in other videos, but if this is the first video you've seen on my channel about the Integra Type S, let's go over it super fast. At 65, we are at 2,500 RPM. At 70, we are at 2,600 RPM. At 75, we are at nearly 3,000. So just know that if you're gonna be cruising at speeds over 75 miles an hour, you're looking at over 3,000 RPM. So with that comes a loss of efficiency, with that comes more engine noise. Now, two of those things are things you know going into this car, but I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you. Take a second and listen to this car at 78 miles an hour. You hear a little bit of wind noise, you hear a good amount of tire noise, and you do hear some engine noise. So this is not an S-Class bank vault, not that you're expecting it to be, but it's priced competitively with the cars like the M340 or the G70, and those cars will definitely be slightly quieter on the highway than this Integra Type S. Now, the sound system does a great job at sort of muting those out, so if you were to be listening to anything, you really wouldn't hear anything from this car, which is nice. But if you turn it down and you just listen to the vehicle, it definitely is a little bit louder. Now, one of the things you should know is if you are using your Apple CarPlay or your Android Auto, and if you are using the native map system to that system, what do I mean by that? Apple Maps with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, your directions will appear on your heads-up display. This does not work with Google Maps or Waze in Apple CarPlay. I don't know which maps work in Android Auto. I have not had the chance to test out someone's Android phone, but in Apple CarPlay, only Apple Maps will reflect the GPS directions in your heads-up display. And it's actually pretty trick because it shows you, hey, you have something coming up, and it gives you a little load bar to the left there of how long or how far away you are from that. It is definitely a helpful system. So it does mean you have to use Apple Maps. I don't mind it as much, but I know folks that commute in traffic that like Waze, that like Google Maps to sort of help them skirt that. They go that direction. Now, as we come off the highway, we're gonna be getting into this backroads portion of this drive. For the rest of this drive, I am gonna be putting it in individual mode. Now, if you guys have not seen my other videos, my individual settings are comfort steering, comfort suspension, and the engine in full kill, which means we get the pops at high revs, which means we get the pops at low revs. We're gonna do one little circle here because why not? But you still get a car that suspension is relatively compliant, relatively comfortable. You get steering that is direct but still a little light, and you get the pops. Who doesn't want a little bit of pops on their back road drive? Now, these pops and bangs are different than you would find in a Focus RS or something like that. They feel less artificial. Ooh, hello. Hello, individual. But, excuse me, they feel less artificial, not individual. Listen. Because you don't get them all the time, which is nice. So what do we learn, what do we know about the Integra as we hit up these back roads? Well, we know a couple things. The engine, the transmission, the suspension, and the brakes are pulled from the Civic Type R, and that gives us a lot right from the jump. We have an engine that is, when retuned, very torquey. We have a transmission that has tight ratios and great throws. We have a clutch that is a little heavy, but not too heavy, also not too light, like a Civic Si, and we have steering that is direct, and in its comfort setting, it is not as heavy. In the Integra, however, when you push it in corners, it is prone to understeer more so than the Civic Type R. Because of the comfort tuning of this car, Acura has tuned in a little understeer to the overall suspension. Now, you don't realize that. You can adjust this car with the throttle very easily. If you're going into a turn too hot, release the throttle a little bit, the nose comes back in. Shout out to the differential for that. But if you drive this back to back with a Type R, you will notice that little subtlety. But it is a ton of fun. This engine is awesome. This transmission is terrific. And you can really just floor it in corners, no problem. And this thing takes it like it's a freaking all-wheel drive car. It just pulls right out. If you were to put someone in the front seat with a blindfold on, they would have no idea you were driving a front-wheel drive car. That is how neutral Acura has made this Integra Type S, and a lot of that credit does go over to the fine folks at Honda. But you knew that going in. If you were interested in this Integra Type S, you knew that it was a ton of fun to drive. You knew that it has a great differential, a tight transmission, good brakes. Oh, you got a lot to love about this car on a back road. So what are the final, as I turned on the automatic wipers, so what are the final thoughts about the Integra Type S? Well, I've owned this car for about 3 weeks now, and we have put over 1,100 miles on it. I've seen roughly 24, 25 mpg, with the highest around that 30, 31 mark in a highway setting. I have loved my time behind the wheel of this car. It is comfortable. It is compliant every day. It gives a professional appearance. It gives a professional upscale feel inside with the tactility of these switches, the gear. It just all feels very premium in this car. Now, you're paying for that, but it's good to see that you're actually rewarded for that, and you're not just paying for the badge like you are in, say, a BMW M235 or Audi products or things like that that are lower on the brand's totem pole. Overall, I would recommend the Acura Integra Type S to the individual that wants a Civic Type R or fun car-like experience with a more professional or with a more daily driver focus. That's not to say you can't daily cars like the Elantra N, like the Civic Type R, and vehicles in that category, but the experience of dailying this is a lot better than those. You get the good sound system, you get the better materials, you get the nicer, more comfortable seats. You get so much more in this price bracket that those cars just don't give you, but you still retain the character, you still retain this transmission, you still retain this engine that the Civic Type R has that you love. You have your cake and you eat it too. That's the magic of the Integra Type S. Now, is it perfect? No. I can't sit up straight in the back seat without hitting my head on the roof. I have to slouch because of this fastback roofline. The passenger seat isn't power. There's no memory seat here for the driver in a $51,000 car. There's things like that that just frustrate me. But overall, by and large, this Acura Integra Type S is one of the most fun family vehicles you can have under $100,000. I'm serious when I say that. Under $100,000. There are few vehicles that compete, there are few vehicles that operate, there are few vehicles that have the same things this car has. Sure, you might find a car with a better interior, you might find a car that's more comfortable, but it's not as playful. It doesn't have a manual transmission. Maybe you find a car with that manual transmission, but it's not as comfortable to drive every day. It's not as practical, it's not a hatchback. The Integra fuses all of them. Now, because it does everything well or okay, it's a master of nothing, right? This isn't the best track car. This isn't the best, most luxurious daily driver. This isn't the best highway cruiser, but it's pretty damn good at everything. And because it's pretty damn good, it rates really highly on my list. I am MoneyShift. Thank you all for tuning in. If you want more Integra Type S content, don't forget to subscribe to this page. Here on MoneyShift, when we drive cars, I try to put as many miles on them as possible to give you an understanding of if this car is for you. Cars are getting more expensive by the day. I mean, hell, this Integra that we're sitting in is $51,000. So if you're gonna be making that decision, if you're gonna be buying a vehicle, you need to know that it is the right car for you. And I hope that through my videos, you just have that little bit more confidence that it either is or is not the right car for you. Hopefully, we can save folks some money and answer some questions along the way. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate the continued support, and we'll see ya in the next one. Goodbye.